Whether or not to grid your fabric for counted cross stitch is one of those things that stitchers have incredibly strong opinions about. I'm Michelle. This is my romantic tangle. I always grid everything, even little projects, unless I don't, and the exceptions are rare. This video is to tell you why I grid and why I sometimes don't. If you're new to the idea of gridding, it is making temporary grid lines on your fabric to match the darker grid lines on your pattern so that you'll be able to double check whether your stitches are in the right spot. Stitchers use different techniques for that. I prefer to use basting thread, which I remove after I'm done stitching. I have a whole other video on how I grid. This is why I grid. When I first started to cross stitch years ago, I had never heard of gridding. I didn't know it was a thing. Once I found out about it, it was literally life-changing as far as my stitching is concerned. I have had so many fewer abandoned projects, or projects that I felt like I had to abandon because I had no other choice. Gridding helps me find my mistakes. Yes, I can count. Yes, I can follow my pattern. But when you are doing something like this, and one of your rows of blue or white is off by just a bit, how do you do enough counting and recounting to find out what is right and what is wrong so you know how far to frog back? Personally, I can't do it. I don't enjoy doing it. I would rather have the safety lines of those grids. So for projects like the waterfall or projects like this with her skirt and the tablecloth, I absolutely rely on those grid lines. You can say they're like bumpers when you're bowling or training wheels on a bicycle. I don't feel bad about using them. Knitters use a technique called lifelines, where if they're doing intricate lace, they will run an extra thread so that if something goes wrong, they can unravel back to a row that they know is right. It's the same kind of idea, and I don't think there's any shame in gridding. This is another project. There's no way I could have done this without the grid lines to help me keep my place. It has made my stitching more enjoyable. It has lessened the amount of projects where I get frustrated and abandon them. I abandon projects for other reasons all the time, but not usually because I made a mistake that I can't find. Stitchers will argue that gridding is time consuming, and yes, it absolutely is. In my experience, I think that the couple of hours I spend gridding a big project like this, over the 100 hours or whatever it takes me to stitch something like this, I will have saved that time by gridding, or saved the entire project by gridding. It's nothing like taking old projects out and holding them up to see all your crease lines. I find it worthwhile. You don't have to grid the whole thing at once. I usually grid a quarter of it, enough to get started, and then go back and do the rest of the gridding later. Sometimes on really little projects where it seems like you wouldn't even need grid lines, especially these little houses, I use them to find my mistakes all the time. My best example of that is this little bee, which I gridded because I grid everything. I had more trouble with the wings of this little bee than I can even begin to explain. But they help me figure out, okay, which stitches are in the right place, which do I need to remove? I grid just about everything. What don't I grid? I don't grid samplers. Something like this, I'm working in straight lines, so I know that the B is next to the A, the C is next to the B. I know they're going in a straight line. That gives me enough reference points that I know I can do it without the grid lines. Something like this with the borders, it's the same way, and I don't like gridding linen. That's part of the reason why I don't grid samplers, to be honest with you, is because I know I can do it just with the rows, and I don't love gridding linen. If I'm doing linen and it is a picture, yes, I'll grid it. I am reasonably confident that I didn't grid this one, although I can't remember for sure. It has been so long. But if I was starting it today, I probably wouldn't grid it. So I'm going to hold it up as another example of things I don't grid. Do I enjoy the process of stitching those grid lines? No. Does it make my stitching easier? Absolutely. And I found that stitching the grid lines when I am at a stitching group or distracted by something else, the time goes by a lot faster than it would if I was sitting alone in my living room. I'm always curious when stitchers are arguing about gridding and whether it is a waste of time or not, and extremely adamant over it. If they're all stitching the same kind of projects, I have a feeling that a lot of the time when we get into these debates, we are comparing apples with oranges. So let me know in the comments, do you grid? Don't you grid? And what are you stitching when you make those decisions? I would love to read about it. If you want information on how I grid, I've got an older video. I'll put a link to it below. And thank you for watching. I'm Michelle. This is my Romantic Tangle, and I'm working on lots more videos, so I'll be back with you soon.